conversations with respect to middle school magnet consortium and middle school reform. What it highlighted as a sort of learning issue was the issue of the opportunity for students to be able to access some of the really engaging elective courses that were really motivating for some students, and that for a lot of students the ability to connect to that piece of their school day, had really beneficial effects going forward. And there was some conversation about work that the system is already doing in looking at how we, irrespective of what models we use in every school, especially focused on middle school as part of our middle school reform, can provide kids access to the opportunities to have that kind of engagement. I didn't see it listed as some in here, and I felt like it was a critical piece of what we were looking for as part of the reform effort. And I was just wondering if we could get some information about where we are with that and whether that's something that we should be capturing.
We have a work group right now that's made up of a number of different stakeholders that are actually right now in the process of benchmarking with other places across the country, and they're going to be bringing forth some recommendations in the early fall. So there is work underway to look at scheduling in the middle school and come forward with recommendations to get at exactly what you're speaking to. How can we be more creative with scheduling and ensure that students have more opportunities to, in particular, engage in elective courses?
So we'll have an opportunity
to... Well, I think you probably ought to, why don't we vote some more time?
More time?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest problem is you don't have enough time in the day.
You
don't have enough days. You're not going to get more electives when you've got to have reading. I mean, you got 25 required courses or 22 required courses. Where's this all going to happen?
Well, and I appreciate that time is always the enemy, and you're absolutely right in the sense of the challenges that our students face. I just wanted to follow up on it because I felt like so much of the feedback that we've gotten is how powerful a learning tool that was.
It is a very powerful learning tool. But you cannot, I mean, I've been sitting here with you for some period of time, and I cannot understand how you're missing the fact that you have a system that teaches 180 days, and they teach about 6 hours, and then there's a certain amount of time. Every time we get together, we hear the same thing. How can you do more with less? Now, you haven't given me one more minute in 10 years as superintendent. There is no creative schedule out there that gives you more time. You want to buy some time? I'd be happy to try to negotiate. But you're not going to get more than a certain number of classes. We've been there, and I've watched this board try to narrow some of those classes. What do you think this 5x8 business that we're dealing with at the middle school is all about?
I think the challenge that we face is, how we accomplish some of the goals. I mean, we've talked about the critical importance of engaging students, and so I just wanted to be sure.
You get a good teacher in every classroom, Mrs. Brandeman, and that'll engage the students very well.
Absolutely, absolutely correct. I'm sorry, I don't know the timing, so I'll do Ms. Berthium and then Mrs. O'Neill.
I just wanted to say that with regard to middle school scheduling, I do think it is an issue, and I think that there may be some creative ways out there that perhaps we need to look at best practices nationwide, because you don't necessarily need to be doing the same thing.
We look constantly.
Can I finish my statement?
You certainly can.
Thank you.
But have it based in some factual matter.
Fine. Sometimes you don't need to have the same period. Sometimes you don't need to have the same 5 scheduled day. Sometimes you can go to a 6-day schedule. I'm not an expert, but I don't see any harm in looking at how to do more with less. And if it engages our middle school students, as we hear constantly from the Middle School Magnet Consortium students how engaged they are, then I think that Mrs. Brandon's correct, that we need to do, what's right for a group of students that's facing challenges developmentally, socially, and we want to keep them in school.
Mrs. Berthium, let me remind you that Mrs. Branneman was on a committee that was 200 and some people strong, that went over a 2-year period, that looked everywhere in the country and the world on the schedules. And we did the middle school reform and predicated it on that committee. They came to the conclusion that we could run, as you say, in some of our middle schools, that type of schedule, but it was about a $21 million issue within this. So it has been studied. That's what I was reacting to. It has been studied. She was on the committee that studied it. She was a co-chair that studied it. So to come back and act like there's some new way, I'm not aware of it. I'm not aware of anywhere in the country it's at, and we have spent thousands of dollars and thousands of hours studying it.
Dr. Weast, I'm just going to clarify before I let Mrs. O'Neill go, and I wasn't suggesting that there was some other way, but I did know that there had been conversations around this table about the fact that there were stakeholders and staff looking at what are ways within the time limits that we have to be able to make sure that kids have access to those kinds of programs. So I just wanted to make sure if there was some work that the system was doing that I thought was important, that it was captured. That was my only suggestion. Mrs. O'Neill?
Yeah, and one of my questions about program expansion for all middle schools. I mean, we did, do middle school reform, and there were various work groups. I mean, various groups that looked at scheduling, course offerings, and we haven't even gotten through beyond phase 1 of middle school. I was
going to say, how are we
reform.
doing with the middle school reform?
We're not.
I mean, where is this board at on the middle school reform, and how have you implemented what you already put forward? Because I agree with you, Mrs. O'Neill, we haven't.
We haven't gotten.
And we just went through that two months ago.
I think I've been pretty much a nag about, how we're going to be able to afford to roll out the rest of middle school reform. And one of the problems is the Middle School Magnet Consortium is wildly successful, and yet the past 2 years we've heard from them as budget cuts were proposed, please save it. But we got to be able to take it on the road beyond just that. And I see that one of the pieces is that we've gone from over the next 3 instead of the next 3 years to 5 years for the schools to be able to choose from those 25 new courses. And I agree with Shirley, it's important to give students in all of our middle schools the opportunity to have something a little bit different. But I know the issue of the schedule, and there was no clear path, because as a member of the policy committee, we had reports from those various they weren't called work groups, but the various groups. But I mean, we're going to be struggling with the budget for the next couple of years, so it isn't going to be a pretty picture, and we got to meet the academic targets first and foremost.
And that's why I'm reacting. I make no apologies for my reaction either, by the way. This board, last meeting, voted on a budget. We were $53 million short, then we cut another $30 million. Our employees gave up $89 million. You gave the county $79.5 million. Now they're asking you maybe to pay a fine on that. You were on that work group. There is no more time. There is no more money. And I think we need to be honest with people. I don't think we need to have our staff working day and night to try to find something that 2 things can answer: more time and more money. Because that's what the work group said. And I wish you would implement what you have already got on the table and not lead people astray. You have monetary issues. You have monetary issues. You want to address those, you've got somebody that really wants to address them sitting right here, because we should be moving the middle school reform forward on schedule. We're several years behind schedule. You have left out schools because we're behind schedule. Now, there's no magic to that. That's what I'm saying, Mrs. Berthium. There is no magic to it. You can't go someplace else and find a hocus pocus that's going to change the situation.
Any other questions?